have been too good to be true. When you were at the top of the list, the devil is a master salesman. You weren't so hard to convince. He closed the deal as only you can and made you feel like a crown prince. So I gotta ask you, did you give it any thought? I just gotta ask you, how does it feel to be bought? How much did you give for your soul? How much did you give for your soul?
It's a good song for Super Bowl weekend. You know, you got Yorgos Lanthimos directing 2 Super Bowl commercials, one with Emma Stone and one for George Clooney. George Clooney for Grubhub. How much did you get for your soul, George? I know you're a good person, but you didn't really need to do that. All right, so we have a lot of things happening in the world of culture, the generally understood world of culture today. So we brought our best here. We have an enlarged format of the nose today. Not an enlarged nose, I want to say, but just an enlarged nose format. So joining us via Zoom are R.S. Benedict, writer and bureaucrat whose fiction and nonfiction has been published in the New Haven Review, Fangoria, Current Affairs, and a bunch of other places. Sam Hadelman, director of public relations at Dark Matter Media. Rich Hollant, founder and principal of CoLab, Hall of Fame designer and co-partner at Center. Mercy Quaye, founder and president of the Narrative Project. In studio with me, Lindsay Lee Wallace, writer and journalist covering culture, health, technology, bats, and anything else people will answer her questions about. Bill Usman, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. Is that enough? Are you not entertained just by hearing the list of guests? And then think about this. Just think about this. The Olympic opening ceremonies are going to happen right at, we're doing the show live at 1 o'clock. If you're listening live, the Olympic opening ceremonies will happen immediately after our show. Not in a way that's connected. You know, it's not as though I'll say, okay, I'm going to throw it to J.D. Vance right now. But that will be happening. The Super Bowl, of course, is Sunday, Bad Bunny and all. This week, President Trump announced the closing of the Kennedy Center for 2 years for renovations and talked about taking it down to the steel. The Washington Post gutted its staff, maybe especially arts and culture coverage. They seem to have almost nobody left there covering the arts. And exactly a week ago today, Melania was released. So that's a lot. That's a lot going on. And I might even just sort of begin by asking people if they want to address any of this. And so, Sam and Lindsay, I know you both have things to say about the Washington Post. So, Lindsay, why don't you get that part started?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I could just talk about how I think that everything that Jeff Bezos touches sort of inherently degrades as a chemical reaction to him. But more broadly, specifically, the Washington Post, as like a relatively still early career journalist, it's just sad to watch publications that I have respected and dreamed of one day potentially writing for get dismantled. I also think that specifically with the arts section, I mean, we're going to have this whole conversation about arts, but the little things about it, like I saw someone say that, you know, that the Heated Rivalry television show might never have been made if the Washington Post book section hadn't covered Rachel Reed's Game Changers books. And a lot of people might think that, you know, a bunch of people not working at a newspaper anymore doesn't have that broad of a cultural effect. But I saw Stephen Colbert call himself a bossy bottom on New Year's Eve coverage, and none of that would have happened without the Washington Post book section either. So it's a silly and also a very serious blow.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, they do seem to have eliminated books coverage. I mean, no book section, and nobody, and I think with any clear responsibility. Another thing that they did, by the way, which I was fascinated by, one of the people they let go in these layoffs, these massive layoffs, was their Pulitzer Prize-winning art critic, and who I believe his name is Sebastian Smee. And I've been working in journalism literally, you're all getting tired of hearing this, but 50 years this year. It'll be 50 years in May. I always assumed that if I won a Pulitzer Prize, which I knew was a very remote possibility, but I figured that would make me kind of layoff proof. Like, you know, you don't get laid off if you got some other poor bastard's going to get laid off. I've got a Pulitzer Prize. I'm staying. That is not how it works anymore, and not in Jeff Bezos' world. So, yeah, I'm like tempted to like yell at the Amazon driver or something.
Not the
you got
Amazon
rid of the
driver.
film critic. What's wrong with you, man?
That's what Jeff Bezos wants you to do.
Yeah, that's what he wants me to do. And Sam, I know you actually know somebody who was caught up in all this.
Yeah. Also, just to like piggyback off your point, as someone who works on the media side, that exact thought has been hitting me every week, where it's like people I know who do panels, get awards, have really invested in the companies they work for and the positions they have, just get laid off for like no rhyme or reason. And it's usually, it's usually like Black journalists. Like it's been almost like at least for what I've seen, like 70 to 80% of the arts critics who I've seen get laid off are Black journalists. And
Is it last hired,
terrifying.
first fired?
Yeah, and with the Washington Post specifically, yeah, they laid off Chris Richards, who is one of my favorite music writers, and there's a bit of a personal connection there. Just because the first big album I ever worked, he didn't like give me any heads up or anything. It just like ran. He wrote that it was the best album of 2023. It was like a small debut record from someone not at a major label. He put it as the #2 best album of the year, and that was the first time I'd ever seen anything like any campaign I'd work on in print. And I don't know, just seeing like a guy like that, who I think he was at the Post for 18 years, get laid off without any rhyme or reason. Just, yeah, it was the terrible day for journalism.
And I also, I'm going to throw there, but we haven't really planned a lot of this conversation, so I'm going to be throwing this to people who may or may not be prepared to answer, except you're all prepared to answer everything. I know that from all these years working with you. And so, Rich Hollant, when we think about an arts community, we don't necessarily also think about the coverage of the arts community. We think about makers, we think about creators, we think about exhibitors. I've always maintained that function, the function that used to reside very, very heavily, more heavily than anywhere else, at newspapers. I worked in the arts department of the Hartford Courant, where the conversation took place. It started there and spread out into the community. Even if the conversation was, Colin McEnroe doesn't know anything about music, why do they let him write about things? That was the beginning of a conversation. And I don't know, Rich, as somebody, you've played so many different roles in the world of arts and creativity, how you feel about the ending of arts coverage in formal organs of the press.
Well, I think it's devastating. And I think that the role that arts coverage played in community is particularly devastating, right? I personally am less concerned, oddly, with what's happening at the Washington Post, because I don't read books based on what the Post recommends. I read books based on what Usman tells me that I've got wrong, that I have to read. The as always, the national issue is not the concern, it's the local issue that's of concern to me. There was a point in which the reporters, the journalists who were doing critiques and writing about the arts were also deeply embedded in the community, right? Mm-hmm. So they weren't just responding to what the big moneyed institutions were funneling through in press releases. They were out there and they knew what was happening, and they were lifting things up so that everyone can see them. And that was is the vibrancy of the community, right? When we could actually see all of what we're made of, that is disappearing, right? And so now I am more and more reliant on Usman telling me what to do. Now he's got
a very bad position, giving him too much power.
Terrible.
Too much power.
Mistake.
Actually, as sort of some semi-serious response to that, I am probably maybe the only person in this conversation who still has a subscription to the Washington Post, an online subscription to the Washington Post, which I am dropping. And as I drop it, I'm going to, you have it too? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to figure out exactly how much money this is. And then I'm going to apportion it across Substacks that I think, would be, or things like that. And maybe, Bill, that's another way this plays out. And it isn't even necessarily horrible in the sense that you're now going to be, paying the content creators directly and not worrying how much of it got siphoned off to the company jet.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable and ethical choice. Because I teach media studies, I sort of feel an obligation to stay in touch with what the mainstream organs are doing or not doing for purposes of critique. So I'm probably not going to drop it. But I do kind of feel like it's going to be less and less useful in my life. But I've been feeling like that since Bezos took over. And I just want to say, like, it's important to recognize this is not the first time that Jeff Bezos has been an enemy of arts and culture. I mean, Amazon is an incredibly destructive force in our society, even as it makes it easier for us to obtain things. But the effect that it's had on independent bookstores and, you know, its general toxicity in the culture, I think has been something that's been going on for a long time. And, you know, there are some connections, I think, between what Bezos is doing to the Washington Post and what Trump is doing to the Kennedy Center, which you brought up, and even to Roger Goodell kind of warning in advance that Bad Bunny better toe the line.
Better be a good bunny.
Yeah, that's right. A good hair.
Yeah.
He's got good hair.
Oh, man.
You're just jealous.
Sorry, I am jealous. But, you know, there's a through line between all of these things of more and more trying to control the culture, to stamp down dissent, and to generally try to silence art and artists. We had an interesting conversation prior to the show about, you know, exactly what the role of art is and when is it complicit and when is it a challenge to power. Rich, you never get anything wrong. You just add new dimensions that encourage me to think about things in different ways.
You know, R.S. Benedict, what Bill is saying, I think, you know, really resonates with me too. But I also wonder, you know, if there's a way we can go around the kind of control that Bill is talking about. I'm even thinking about the fact, and I don't know what it's like the way where you live, but yeah, Amazon started to destroy independent bookstores, but it turned out the real damage was to like Borders. You know, Borders didn't survive very well. I don't know what kind of shape Barnes & Noble is, but it turns out people want a little independent bookstore.
Barnes & Noble is surprisingly doing well.
They're humming, yeah.
Yeah,
but
there's certain things they've done.
I think there's go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that Barnes & Noble is doing well because I think that folks who are standing in opposition of Amazon and Jeff Bezos need an alternative, and that's where their market is. But I think what's interesting to me is that Jeff Bezos is becoming the Rupert Murdoch of our time, even though like the effects of Rupert Murdoch are very much still alive and present. But over his reign, I'll call it, Murdoch shut down hundreds of small newspapers, shut down, closed, dwindled, or moved to exclusively online formats. Hundreds we're talking about. And while we know that the Washington Post beats that were most affected were things like books, arts, and podcasts, and we're spending a lot of time talking about that, I think it's meaningful to do so. The things I care a great deal about is like the local beats and the like community desks that have been shut down. That's a huge issue. And when we think about Bezos's willingness to interfere editorially, that's actually what I'm most concerned about. Let's not forget in 2024, during the presidential election, WAPO ran a endorsement of Kamala Harris that he effectively shut down just because he's not up in here, right? And that's problematic. I think we need to be having a really clear-eyed assessment of what does it mean to have oligarchs controlling our media.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Almost worse than that. Or there's been the editorial they ran the day after the New York mayoral election, where they referred to him as Generalissimo Mamdani in their editorial. Please. Yeah. He's been in office 24 hours. He can't possibly deserve that kind of address. Yeah, you know, R.S. Benedict, I think about that too, about smaller culture. You know, I mean, here in, I don't know about up in Albany, but, you know, here in West Hartford, we now have Riverbend Books, which is a very small bookstore. You go in, there's like people there who run the place and know the place, and they're put those little signs up saying that which person who works at the cash register liked this particular book. I think there's a hunger sometimes for smaller forms of culture. And so the more that it gets controlled at the corporate level, I wonder if that could even be a good thing for smaller films, smaller bookstores. I'm doing my whole E.F. Schumacher thing here right now.
I mean, I think it can be a good thing, and there definitely is a hunger for local culture, but the issue is that it's a little bit harder to sustain it. I mean, if it's local, if it's smaller, there's just less money to put into it. It costs less money to run it, but it also generates less money, so many of the people involved can't do this professionally. Recently, we had a local arts monthly journal revive itself in Albany called Metroland. Everybody on the staff is doing this volunteer. No one's able to make a living off of it. This thing is this thing is distributed for free. And while I'm really happy that it exists, it's a heck of a whole lot harder to coordinate something and really throw yourself in and really sharpen your writing for something when it's a free thing. And if it's free, obviously you're going to have to put it on the back burner to prioritize the stuff that you need to do in order to afford food and housing, you know?
I also feel like that's relevant when you think about the fact that you need an audience of people who have the time and the resources to consume art in order for the people who are trying to make money producing art to have that be a viable option. And like when Amazon moves into an area and then the local economy reacts to the construction of a data center or the construction of like a warehouse where wages are kept low and worker rights are suppressed and there's union busting, none of the people who work there are in a good position to say, and I'm going to go to my local bookstore where, you know, maybe things cost a little bit extra, or I have an evening to go to the reading there. People are being pushed into poverty in a way that also makes it so that you can't be a casual consumer of art either. And those institutions suffer on both sides.
And the reality is, you know, the reason why politically we want to attack the arts is because you can control information, but you can't control imagination. And that's what the arts does. Right. And I think that when we think of pieces like Fiddler on the Roof, or when we think of pieces like Cabaret, you know, one of my favorite memes coming out of the 2024 election was, how did we go from hot girl summer to fascist winter? And it's like, that's literally the premise of Cabaret. It's like, and here we are.
Yeah, the night that Biden crashed and burned during the debate, somehow or other, considering I'm a journalist, you think I would have been watching the debate live. Somehow or other, I had tickets to see South Pacific at the good speed. And of course, the song You've Got to Be Carefully Taught is such a perfect explanation of the kind of indoctrination of bias and prejudice and that seems to be haunting us right now and making it easy for some of us to treat others of us really, really badly. So Mercy, to your point, I think the arts are very potent and there's a reason to maybe want to control them as much as possible.
But, you know, there is a kind of antidote to that, though, is that the accountant will not go to work in the morning if he's not getting paid, but the artist will. Mm-hmm. And so to paraphrase Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, art will find a way. And if there's anything that I hang my hat on, it's that, right? Is that we're the first I've been in places that are incredibly, intensely oppressed, filled with poverty, filled with, you know, not just starving artists, but a starving populace. And the art is amazing and vibrant and real and true that people will paint until they die. Now, do I advocate for that? Hell no, absolutely not. You know, if I could unionize all artists, I would. But there is an alternate truth to that regardless of what the machine wants to do, art endures.
Yeah, it could be that we can throw journalism into that conversation now too, and it becomes something that we're all going to turn into Ethan Hawke and The Lowdown, with some kind of journalistic enterprise that does not, in fact, pay the bills, and we're constantly worried about stuff like that. Okay, I'll tell you what, this is a great panel. We got a lot of things to talk about. I think we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll say more.
Done been killed, sent away. Yeah, the people know it's winter. Winter in America. And ain't nobody fighting 'cause nobody knows what to say. And ain't nobody fighting 'cause nobody knows what to say.
All right, we're back with the nose. We have an all-star panel. I'll just say their names because if I give their titles, the show will be over. R.S. Benedict, Sam Hadelman, Rich Hollant, Mercy Quaye, Lindsay Lee Wallace, Bill Usman. The latter two are here in the studio with me. The others are on Zoom. And we're going to talk a little bit in this segment, too, about how all of us are using culture, either to stay sane or to comfort ourselves or distract ourselves or to energize ourselves for the possibility of resistance. All of those things can happen. R.S. Benedict, I'm going to begin with you because I've seen the notes from the pre-interview. You know, and usually when you're on the show, it's to tell us about some, you know, low-budget film called The Sink That Regurgitated Blood or something.
I love that one.
Yes, it's a great movie. I'm in
Yeah,
no
it's great.
way.
The sequels are fantastic
Yeah,
too. They really
I'm
hit
in
their
no
own
way
on, like, part
casting.
3.
I am not casting asparagus on The Sink That Regurgitated Blood. It's wonderful, but you're like the stuff that you're watching right now kind of doesn't fit my preconception of you. So say a little bit about that and why you're doing it.
I have been binge watching Golden Girls. I have just been injecting Golden Girls directly into my veins for the past year and a half. I'm trying to figure out why, but lately all that's crossing my mind is how would Rosen Island and the people of St. Olaf, Minnesota, respond to ice? I feel like there'd be some sort of herring-based resistance movement.
No, I mean, first of all, I'm not that hip to the Golden Girls, but I do know that the Golden Girls is the person who created the Golden Girls. Essentially, is the person who created Arrested Development, Mitch Hurwitz. I mean, it's sort of the same mind behind both of those things. And he certainly, when you think about Arrested Development and how nihilistic that is, in a lot of ways, maybe some of that is like there under the Golden Girls in ways that I hadn't even picked up.
I mean, partly the show holds up surprisingly well. It's surprisingly very pro-LGBT for a show from the 1980s. And it gets a little bit political. There are bits where it feels a little uncomfortable to kind of remember, oh, we haven't changed that much. There's an episode where, all full of good intentions, Dorothy accidentally gets a kid deported. So,
Whoa.
Here we are.
Whoa.
Yes. Yeah.
Whow.
Problematic, Dorothy.
You know, just to talk to some other people about stuff that they're listening to. Whenever I are watching, whenever I think about now and just the level of very legitimate paranoia that exists here now, I always think about the 1970s because the culture of the 1970s was super paranoid. I mean, we'd been through the 60s, which were very, very turbulent in lots of ways. And then in the early 70s, it became clear that the federal government was responding to the turbulence of the 60s by investigating us. And so, Sam, I know you're doing kind of a Cook's tour of 1970s paranoid cinema, but tell us about that.
Yeah, sometimes it's easier for me to interpret what's going on now by looking back. And obviously I wasn't there, so I only can go through it with movies. So it's like the media I'm consuming is either like unbelievably paranoid or blissfully unaware. So like the Alan Pakula, the Clue, All the President's Men, forgetting the third one, but especially Clue. When I watch Clue and like the distrust in the government post-Vietnam, post-Nixon, it's kind of comparable to where we're at. And I kind of feel sometimes like Warren Beatty and Clute, where I'm like, man, is this all really going on, or am I nuts?
No, wait a minute. Warren Beatty's in Parallax View. I think you're on Parallax View right
Parallax View. There it is. That's the third one. Thank you. Or then I'm watching movies like Francis Ha, the Noah Baumbach movie, which is about some hipster in a black and white makeshift Woody Allen movie, smoking cigarettes and hanging out with, guys you shouldn't hang out with. So it's like a nice balance of like horrible paranoia of like old dudes smoking cigarettes like Columbo and Warren Beatty, and then kind of like the Francis Ha, Squid and the Whale, Noah Baumbach, relaxed, the calmer times of the early 2010s. I think that's how I'm balancing it out with like older media.
Yeah, you may be the first person I know who ever found a productive use for Francis Ha, but but that's good. It's good that somebody is getting some kind of joy about it. Rich, you went a step further with Apocalypse Now. Tell us about that. Oh, do we have Rich?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
The whole Apocalypse Now started quite accidentally, I've been watching 11/22/63 with my kid, whose idea was to watch this. My 16-year-old. He's like, "Oh, let's watch this. This is cool." And they made a reference to some stuff that was going on in Apocalypse Now, right? And so I started watching this thing again, and I remembered it feeling kind of like literal Conrad, right? That it was all metaphor, all just sort of allegory stacked on top of allegory, right? And in watching it again, it felt creepy real. It felt like, oh my God, this is not Saigon. This is like the Farmington River. That was actually kind of alarming, that all of the statements about, well, I mean, it was alarming in two ways, right? One, it's an alarming reaction to where we are right now, but it's also a recognition that we've been given the heads up for so long, and that this was coming, and that we've lived through this and we'll live through it again, and we didn't take it all that seriously, right?
Yeah.
And so I started doing deep research, right? So I'm enjoying 11/22/63, which is the year JFK was assassinated. A great little complicated Stephen King series with James Franco. And I'm doing deep research. I'm getting in, and I keep stumbling across images of ice right now that remind me of these beautiful images, by the way, which I hate to say, that remind me of Pulitzer Prize winning photographs out of Saigon, and digging into the backstories there about what Eddie Adams was actually seeing when he shot the series called Saigon Execution. And it's sobering, it's scary, and in a lot of ways, it's reassuring to know that we've gone through that and we'll go through it again with so much access to information and history that we stand a chance this time of coming on the other side and not replicating it.
Yeah, with Apocalypse Now, you just have to change Brando's line to, "You are an Amazon delivery truck sent by Jeff Bezos to deliver a package."
And it plays.
And we're right here, yeah. Reassuring is interesting, too, because, Lindsay, one reason that I read detective novels is because, and Adrian McKinty, maybe my favorite writer, and one of his detective, Sean Duffy, talks about the idea of a detective as somebody trying to hold back chaos, somebody trying to maintain some kind of order. And I think we gravitate towards culture sometimes in that way, particularly when we feel very out of control and not particularly empowered to do anything about it. And I know some of the choices you've been making kind of maybe fit that.
Yeah, I definitely have been seeking out things that sort of, I've been doing a lot of rewatching, and specifically rewatching of things that activate the same anxieties that current events are activating. And then also because they're stories that were built to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, they end. And I don't get to experience the end of any of what is happening right now, although I hope to within my lifetime. And I think that, you mentioned detective stories. I love the first season of True Detective. I've been rewatching that. And I think that, that's also an example of specifically something happening right now of people using the claims to want to defend children and the claims to, be serving God to do horrible things, and everyone, coming together to hide horrible things being done in the interest of protecting the rich and the powerful. And then also, you've got Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson having what I believe to be a weird amount of romantic chemistry, and that's sort of a nice distraction for me at this time as well. But Sinners is a relatively recent thing, but I can call it rewatching if I'm on my fourth watch. So I think that that is also something that is, lionizing to see right now. I've been rewatching my problematic faves in The West Wing, which is Aaron Sorkin's constant interest in writing fan fiction about the United States government, where it's like actually productive to be like a centrist who talks too much, and everyone thinks it's unconscionable that we would turn away asylum seekers, and it's completely unreasonable to be worried about Roe as settled law. So that universe is kind of comforting to imagine as a real one as well right now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the thing about anything like West Wing for me is that it still posits the idea of guardrails. You know, you don't really feel like things can ever fully spin out of control, no matter how dire the situation is. You just feel like there is some source of order there in a way that there isn't now. And it's kind of, you know, to Sam, I think, did you also watch Day of the Condor while you were doing all this 70s stuff?
Yes, I did. The 3 days of the Condor, absolutely.
I feel like the whole thing, like Cliff Robertson says, a car door will open and, you know, that'll be the end of your life. I feel like we're closer to that reality than anything in the West Wing, Sam. I feel like these kind of really gloomy endings to these movies, but maybe you want to say something about that.
Yeah, it's almost like unnervingly comforting that like somebody else at 40, 50 years ago in American history can create something that like feels comparable to now. And it doesn't make me feel like less crazy, like especially with like 3 days of the Condor, the state of the government, conspiracy, not trusting anything. It's like cool to watch someone be like, oh yeah, we felt like this before iPhones and Trump. Awesome, sick. So I find comfort in that.
I always think of the West Wing as utopian speculative fiction. Like it really is like an alternative history where the people who rise to power have some goodness as part of their soul and are doing it for good reasons rather than for just rapaciousness and vile attempts to, one up each other. Although they do a lot of one-upping each other during the show.
Yeah, go ahead, Mercy.
So much one-upping each other. Allow me to do the same. I think that the practice that is the West Wing, particularly for those of us on this call who come from a background of literature or journalism, is like the practice is what happens if we wield language to empower and inspire people, right? There is something coming from the journalistic point of view or communications point of view. Toby is a master of language, right? I think of these characters who are wielding language in a way that, as I sit back in my chair and wonder if possibility and hope are ever going to be accessible to me ever again, I can listen to the writing of Aaron Sorkin and go, maybe, just maybe, it would be. And I'll say, Richard, bringing it back to not Gilmore Girls, gosh, Golden Girls, and thinking about who they would be today. Let us not forget the fact that Golden Girls is credited for being one of the early sitcoms to talk about abortion before Roe v. Wade, right? I mean, these were radical women who, during a time where being liberal was kind of obvious if you wanted to be cool, if you wanted to be, tapped into political culture in any way.
Yeah, Mercy, when you say the thing you said before that too, it makes me think about the whole idea of eloquence and being articulate. Because that's something that I think most of us respect. Most of us are here, all of us here are kind of word people. We like the idea of somebody. But I wonder about that, and I wonder about Sorkin's exaltation of this. I'm just going to throw this out Bill Clinton was really, really a brilliant rhetorician.
And his speechwriters too.
Yeah, good speechwriters, and his staff was very West Wingy. I think Bill Curry was on his staff. Really, really smart people, really, really good with words. Bill Clinton was not always, behaving when he wasn't being eloquent in a way that we would necessarily feel. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, he wasn't? Wait,
that's a good example of I want to believe when I watch The West Wing and I feel comforted by it that if you can make a compassionate, well-reasoned argument, then you must inside of your mind also be a compassionate, well-reasoned person. And I think Bill Clinton is a good example of someone about whom that's not necessarily true. And also when you are looking at, the Washington Post getting gutted. You're looking at like the degradation and consolidation of the media ecosystem. You want to believe that like if somebody can make a compelling argument, then that means that they must be saying something that's important and that nobody would be able to speak so passionately and be telling lies. And now if you've only got a few news sources and if they're very carefully edited by somebody with like billionaire interests, then that's the furthest thing from true. People who speak very passionately are very often doing it in service of things that are not true and actively dangerous for us to believe.
Steve Bannon is really good with words.
Yeah.
It feels like the West Wing like political sphere is like for people who put coexist stickers on their cars. Like it's like almost like that.
No,
level.
I think coexist would be too radical. It's like the ones with the tolerance stickers on their cars. It's like,
we believe in science.
Right.
Everyone is accepted. It's like I'm like, Aaron Sorkin, what opioids and centrism can do, right?
and also let's not forget. I mean, like the phrase "the streets of heaven are far too crowded with angels tonight" after a mass shooting. That's compelling. That's compelling writing, right? And it reminds us of a time in the U.S. that just doesn't exist anymore.
All right, we're going to have to grab another break here. Yeah, who was about to say something? Because
I was just going to say, but it's the government we want, not the government we have.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm still thinking about Sam. Sam, did either of your parents ever have a coexist thing on their car?
Absolutely not.
I didn't think Alan did, no, but no. I don't know your mom. All right, let's take a little break. We'll come back and we'll talk some more.
It's a lot of explaining to do for why you ain't got a Roth IRA. It won't be long till the finale, singing Hotel California and the holy eternal choir for giving us such amazing music. We could almost forgive you for a situation this damn dire. It's the geriatric, narcissistic, oligarch Olympics, and we've all got a front row seat. As long as I can use the Wi-Fi, as long as I ain't gotta think.
And we are back. Time to say some thank yous. We will start with the maestro, Dylan Reyes, who is our technical producer. Jonathan McPants is the producer of this episode. And, of course, we are acquired many years ago by Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions. I think somebody almost said Gilmore Girls as a slip there. That could have caused all kinds of trouble because she, of course, controls that podcast. All right, so here we go. We have a cast of thousands. I'm not even going to name them all. We have just a little bit of time left here. But I'm going to have Mercy and Bill, I think, are the people who have this assignment. Sometimes we just think, people never change. They're just always the same. But that's not true. There's the possibility of personal growth. Kanye, or Ye, apologized. Publicly apologized for. Bill, take over. I can't even introduce this thing effectively. You and Mercy have to explain it.
He wrote me a letter and he said, Bill, I'm sorry that I suggested wiping out your entire people and that Hitler was a cool dude. No, Kanye West, the musician, went really off the rails for a long time with really viciously anti-Semitic, racist, pro-Nazi, kind of social media messaging, and even in some songs, even in some music. But then he recently published, he paid for a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Why the Wall Street Journal is a really
it couldn't
open
have been the
question.
Washington Post now.
That's right.
True. Where he apologized for all of that, and he said he was wrong, and he is sorry for the harm he caused, and that he attributed it to mental illness and a terrible accident that he had suffered. And I just think it opens up these really, really interesting questions about, are we willing to take him at his word, or is this just, kind of a stunt? I mean, I'm someone who before this was very fond of Kanye West. I like his music a lot. Don't forget, this was the guy who created one of the best moments in live television ever during a Hurricane Katrina telethon to raise money, where he said, George Bush doesn't care about white people, about black people.
George
Bush doesn't care about black people. And Mike Myers was standing there looking like, what just happened? So I'm willing to cut him a lot of slack. But, Mercy works in public relations, and I'm wondering her perspective about that. Like, is this just, sort of like an identity reclamation, crisis, I'm going to clean this up kind of thing?
Yeah, so from a public relations perspective, I think it's important to note that apologies matter a great deal, but the words on their own that's not the entirety of the apology, right? The coming months, the actions after, that's all a part of the apology. Mm-hmm. And what's clear to me is that this might be a recession indicator. He's got an album coming out soon. I think that he's lost a number of endorsements. Tying your apology with the release of, an album is, from my perspective, if I was advising him, I would not. But if I was, it was ill-advised. Hold the release of your album a number of months, end of the year kind of thing. Release your apology at the top of the year, as he did, and then don't do anything for a while. Maybe show me some actions that show, do some things, have some actions that show exactly where your head is now. I agree, Bill. This is the guy that said George Bush doesn't care about black people. This is also the guy that said eventually later on that 200, 400 years of slavery sounds like a choice.
Yeah.
This apology, what I will remind people was about his anti-Semitic remarks. He had a couple remarks in the apology that, were targeted towards the black community, mm-hmm. but not nearly enough. Mm-hmm. And what we should remember is Kanye's rise to fame is because of the black community. Mm-hmm. I am someone who, from Dropout to Late Registration to Graduation to 808s and Heartbreaks to my Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, I am a fan.
Great
I am
albums.
pained, right? I am pained to not support him anymore. And I am on the fence about whether I will, but that's not because of the single apology. I need to see what happens over the next few months.
Also, in a crazy world, maybe I'll throw this over to Sam, but in a crazy world where we have a president who does stuff like contact the Prime Minister of Norway to say that he's mad that he didn't get the Nobel Prize and therefore he's no longer committed to peace processes. When people say stuff like that, I think it's important to know when even an apology is crazy. He wrote that 25 years ago, this is yay now, that he was in a car accident that caused significant brain damage that he said wasn't properly diagnosed until 2023. And then he added that medical oversight caused mental health problems that led to bipolar type 1 diagnosis. Weekend Update said, even when it comes to excuses, he's a creative genius. But, Sam, I don't know. I was in a car accident, so I turned into a Nazi sympathizer. I just don't know that that's an apology I'm prepared to accept from anybody.
Yeah, I have to pick my words so wisely here.
Maybe I should have thrown it to you. I wasn't really thinking about your career when I put you on the
You could say whatever you want and then just blame it on an accident.
You can pass.
You had a fender bender last year.
Yeah. Someone saw your coexist bumper sticker and they just freaked out.
On my way to the nose.
You can, Sam. You can pass this to any panelist if you don't want to.
It's cool. It's cool. I think with my generation, we don't have these intrinsic ties to celebrity, if that makes sense. I can crystallize the Kanye West that I remember, put him in a compartment, and never think about what he does in 2026. And on the other hand, I personally think sometimes the scale of who we let back in is dictated by Roman Polanski gets a standing ovation for The Pianist and gets to go to the Oscars, and there's a bunch of white, massive media figures, especially this week, that we expose terrible things, they say terrible things, and they get invited back. And I have to weigh, am I being fair to the artist by exiling this person for doing this, but allowing this? And the rules are pretty much non-existent, as you said.
Problem now. And that's your generation's problem now.
Yeah, but
I think we're getting to the Slattery scale. The Slattery.
Yes, I was going to bring up the Slattery scale, just to remind people of the Slattery scale. And Lindsay, I'll ask you to respond to this idea. Brian Slattery proposed on this show that the way you should think about these things is how much you would have to give up in the form. I'll give an example. Okay, I think Kevin Spacey's a great actor, and I really have just enjoyed so many Kevin Spacey performances, and I like rewatching them and stuff like that. And then you have to weigh that against the magnitude of the assumed or proven offense. So it would be easier, therefore, to cancel Kenny G.
Just for just about anything, right?
And I don't know whether, but I wonder whether that's really, I think it's a great way to think about it, and it has become the way that I think about it, but I don't know whether it's a moral way to think about it.
Just before Lindsay jumps in, I just want to point out that the accident was caused by a runaway bagel truck. I think that changes how we have to think about all of this.
Yeah.
And just before Lindsay jumps in, I want to say, that Usman just turned into Kanye.
I was going to say that I had the best album of the year, and you're going to let me finish, but...
And I can't afford a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal, so I'm cooked.
Wait, just before Lindsay jumps in, I want to remind everyone that Robert Downey Jr. had the back of Mel Gibson.
No one else wants to jump in. Okay.
Well,
I think that this reminds me of something that I think RS said when we were having the conversation before this, which is that a lot of people now, because we feel powerless and also because we've been told that the most meaningful thing we can do as consumers is decide with where we spend our money what we believe in. And I do think that it matters a lot who we decide is allowed to come back from having, become a Nazi or become whatever other things horrible people do and then decide that they want to participate in polite culture again. Like, there are a lot of things that we could all be doing to make our political beliefs clear in the way that we live our lives that go far beyond whether or not you're going to listen to Kanye West. And I do think it's part of it. And I also think that when we have that as the beginning and end of the conversation, then that's how we also end up being like, gosh, I hope that someone will do something about the ICE raids. And it's like, well, you can definitely talk to your neighbors. You can definitely take action based on your beliefs beyond how you consume culture.
Yeah.
The other thing I feel about this is he issued this apology as though we weren't there for the car accident, right? Like we were there for it. We remember.
I was driving the bagel truck.
We heard through the wire.
We heard through, right? Like exactly through the wire. He was like, man, like there is this forgetfulness that he has in this apology. We were there for it, and you weren't always this person. But I do like the idea of consuming hip hop in ways that I might not have been there for. Like Stuff You Should Know just ran an episode that they're calling the Ballad of the Feud Between Biggie and Tupac. And this one little excerpt is, we're talking about Biggie and Tupac, and they're pretty well known. If you listen to one of them or either of them, or even have a passing awareness of hip hop, especially in the 90s, you probably know that Biggie and Tupac had probably the biggest rivalry in the hip hop world. I loved that as a line because I was there for that too. And I want to act like I wasn't. Give it to me clean.
All right, we have to stop. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody. R.S. Benedict, writer and bureaucrat. Sam Hadelman, director of public relations, Dark Matter Media. Rich Hollant, co-founder and principal at CoLab, Hall of Fame designer. Mercy Quaye, founder and president of the Narrative Project. Lindsay Lee Wallace, writer and journalist covering culture, health, technology, bats. Bill Usman, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. I couldn't do it all in one breath. That's how many of you there are, or how decrepit I am. I'm not sure which one, but thanks for listening today.
All the berry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah. Along the rail.